Okay, let's get back to building the ultimate video studio PC build computer. Now, one cable that I hadn't hooked up is called the DB-Sense cable, and one of my followers, he says that cable needs to be hooked up. And so you can see it goes right here on the motherboard. So we're going to hook that up. I also wanted to talk about something else that I learned, which was the motherboard comes with this HDMI port. Now, what that's for is before you button up the computer or anything, you can hook a monitor up to this port and troubleshoot any problems that you have prior to the final configuration or anything. Now, it was also recommended to me that the monitor that I use, maybe not necessarily to hook up to this port, because this is only a 1920 by 1080 30 hertz port. When I power on the computer, I'm going to have obviously the monitor connected into the back of the motherboard. And he was recommending that we use the best monitor that we have, which is that 27-inch that I've detailed in previous videos, which has got the super high resolution and everything, because on power up, the computer is going to detect the monitor, and then you could go back later in the operating system and probably configure that monitor in. But why not just have the computer configure that monitor upon startup? So this is that connection we're going to make to the DB-Sense right there. So we're going to do that. And this is the cable. That's what I was telling you. It's kind of weird looking, isn't it? Where we'll route that in the computer. I wanted to talk about these for just 1 second. It turns out, and I didn't know this, some of the M2 modules that you put in the computer are double-sided and single-sided. Nowhere in the documentation does it talk about this fact. Okay, now if you've got a single-sided, which my crucials are, you have to add another layer of thermal protection underneath the M2 drive. And the motherboard comes with 4 of these. Now, 2 of my modules, the Western Digital and the Samsung, are double-sided. And on a double-sided, you would not add this in. But the crucials, which are only 4 terabytes, are single-sided, which are actually made for laptops. I didn't know. And so you're going to want to add one of these below the M2 drive, which we've already done. I won't show you that. Let's keep going here. I've got it marked in the manual. Hold on. So anyway, this is probably the most helpful page of the manual because it kind of shows you all the connections. And so if you look right here, once you know what a DB-Sense connection is, you can also look at this diagram and see that it goes right there. All right, so we're going to be making some changes. Well, let's get over to the computer case, and I'll show you what I discovered actually watching my own video. And nobody, I found this on my own. Remember I had that USB-C cable right here, and I told you I didn't know where it went, and I was going to route it out the back of the case for an extra. It actually goes into the power supply. Can you see that right there? And I knew the cable came. I didn't think it came with the motherboard, and I don't know. And when you get into this project, sometimes your cabling gets mixed up. That's why you got to proceed slowly and carefully, And so now we've got this hooked into the power supply, routing it through the bottom of the motherboard there. Now let's talk about some last minute changes that we are going to make. It was pointed out to me, and it wasn't obvious. If you look here, there's a little plastic tab. Can you see it on the video right there? I need to pull that plastic tab off, which is crazy. I didn't see that. I'm surprised somebody caught that in the video. So we'll go ahead and pull that off. Let's do that right now. Well, I can't get it. I'll have to get like a little pair of pliers because I've got the motherboard mounted in the computer. The other thing that was suggested to me was we're going to reverse the Arctic flow radiator. so that this cabling, rather than coming down by the fan, which it does right now, it'll come out of this side. Now, the reason I had it mounted in this direction was I thought it would interfere with the graphics card. And actually, in this configuration, it's even worse because I thought this was a strap. This is actually just a wire. So that's why I thought, because I was using this, I hope I didn't damage the radiator, because I was kind of holding the radiator in place while I mounted it, because I didn't realize this was a wire for the fans. So yeah, dumber than a bag of stones, but I think we're getting there. Now here's the little DV-Sense connector. Can you see it right there? And that's where we're going to hook that final cable. We'll pull that plastic tab off, and then of course reverse the radiator. And then of course all we got to do is mount the CPU, put in the graphics card. I've already talked about this. Now look at here. So you got plastic on this too. I haven't pulled it off yet. So we're getting there. And then of course this is look at this weird power connector, huh? Remember the old GPU power connectors? They were, I think some power supplies used to come with like 3 power connectors. And as far as I can tell, that's the only one for the GPU. Looking at the graphics card, I can show you. Here's the graphics card right here. And let's tilt it up. See, there's the power connector right there, and that's it. That's the only power connector on the GPU. So, and there's obviously nothing under. You wouldn't have it underneath the card. And let's check the side. No, nothing on the side. And so you do have these screw holes for mounting a supporting bracket. So that's going to be good, because the graphics card actually comes with its own supporting bracket. So I'll probably be double supporting this graphics card once we get it in the case. But in fact, let's watch the video that I found right now on installing a graphics card, and we'll get back into the build after I've made these changes. So I hope you're kind of learning with me as we move along. It's kind of crazy. All right, let's watch that video.
Before you start ramming your GPU into your PC. GPUs require access to a PCI Express or PCIe slot. These are the long rectangular connectors on your motherboard. Some motherboards have multiple slots, but they're not all equal in terms of performance. Typically, the top slot is where you want to install your GPU because it has full unrestricted access to the PCIe bandwidth. If you want to double check, you can easily verify this with your motherboard's manual. Most GPUs require a direct connection to the power supply. It's important to make sure your power supply can provide enough power to run your GPU. GPU manufacturers usually provide a recommended system power supply rating, and you can find that under the GPU specs on their websites. Make sure your power supply has the right connectors. Traditional GPU or PCIe power cables typically have a 6+2 pin configuration, making 8 pins total. There's also these newer 16-pin connectors called 12-volt high power or 12-volt 2x6 that can deliver a ton of power to the latest GPUs. So you need to know which power connectors you're going to need, and then make sure you have them available before you start installing your GPU. The first thing you want to do is make sure the system's off and disconnected from the power source. It's also a good idea to touch a metal object to discharge any static electricity from your body. Sensitive electronics like GPUs don't really like getting shocked. We need to make sure we have access to the correct expansion slots on the back of the case so we can mount our GPU. I find the easiest way to do that is to just pick up the GPU and line it up with the PCIe slot on the motherboard. When we do that, it's easy to see the back plate of the GPU is going to need access to these 2 expansion slots. On this case, the expansion slots are secured with screws, so I'll just take my screwdriver and unscrew those. And then I can slide the mesh covers out of those slots. Hold onto those screws you just took out because you're going to need them to secure the GPU. Now, if we take a look at the PCIe connector on our GPU, you can see it's got this little tab sticking out on one side. That's what allows the GPU to lock into position in the PCIe slot. Now, if we look at the slot on the motherboard, you can see there's a little locking clip on the end. We need to push that back so it's open and ready to accept the little tab on the connector of the GPU. I'm going to line up the connector on the GPU with the slot on the motherboard and line up the back panel with the open spaces on the back of the case at the same time. And with it all lined up, I'm going to press it into the slot by applying some pressure to the side of the GPU. If you did it right, you should see that locking clip close, and it should make a click sound as well. I ran into a bit of an issue here. The I/O plate on my GPU was hitting the mesh cover on the next expansion slot down from where I'm installing. It wasn't letting me get the GPU all the way against the back panel of the case, so I'm just removing the third cover plate here and that'll fix the problem. Depending on the GPU and case you have, you might run into little issues like this, but don't worry about it, it's really not a big deal. Next, we need to secure the GPU to the case with the screws we removed from those expansion slots at the back. You can see how the GPU kind of wants to sag down under its own weight, so we're going to need to support it to be able to get the screw holes all lined up. That looks good right there, and I'm going to put both screws back in and make sure they're nice and tight. Now we're going to move on to hooking up the power. If your cables are already installed in your power supply, then you just need to look at it and find the right ones that you're going to need. But if you have a modular power supply and you're starting from scratch, you're going to have to plug those cables in yourself. If that's the case, find your PCIe or 16-pin power cables that came with your power supply. They should be labeled PCIe or VGA. Plug the solid end, not the split 6+2 end, into the PCIe power connector on your power supply. Take your time and pay attention to the labels on the cables and the power supply when you're doing this. Sometimes CPU power cables can be confused with PCI Express or GPU power cables because they look so similar, but they are very different and it's important to get it right. If you're going to be using the 16-pin high power cable, that's going to have its own labeled connector on the power supply as well. If you need more help with your power supply cables, I have a detailed video that I'll link for you down in the description. Keep in mind, every power connector on your GPU is going to need a cable plugged into it. I'm currently not aware of any GPUs that use more than one 16-pin high power cable, so you're just going to need one of those if your GPU has that connection type. Next, we're going to feed the cables through one of the cutouts or pass-throughs to the main area of the case where the GPU is. And you want to try and plan it out so the cables don't get in the way of any fans or other hardware in your build. Luckily, power cables are designed so they can only go in one way. If you look at the cable, you can see a little clip on one side. That needs to latch onto the notch on the connector on the GPU, so that's how you know which way to plug it in. If you only need 6 of the 8 pins, you can just leave those extra 2 off there. But if you do need all 8, there's a tiny little notch on there that clips the 2 pieces together to make it easier to push into the connector. So we can just line this up with the connector and press it all the way in. You should hear a little click sound when the clip latches onto the connector. Good. Now, if you have cables like this one that have a secondary 8-pin connector coming off the main one, I recommend just using the main connector. So if your GPU has 2 or more 8-pin connectors that need power, you really should be going with separate power cables for each one rather than making multiple connections with one cable. With the 16-pin cables, power supply manufacturers advise against bending the cable too close to the connector. You can just check your power supply manual to confirm the requirements and recommendations for your cable. So with this one, we just line it up with the connector and push it all the way in as far as it'll go. And this GPU has a little red light there that goes off once the cable's properly seated. It's nice because it makes it really easy to tell when it's fully inserted. And if we look at the cable now, we can see we don't have a bend within the first 40 millimeters, so we're good. If you're using one of these adapters to go from 8-pin cables to the 16-pin connector, again, you're going to want to make sure you use a separate cable for each splitter going into the adapter. Now we can plug our monitor into the graphics card. I have an HDMI cable, you might have the same, or you could have DisplayPort. Don't forget to plug your main system power back in and fire it up. Depending on your system, when you install a new piece of hardware like a GPU, sometimes it could take a little extra time to boot up while the system runs a few checks, so just be patient and it should boot up like normal. Okay, now we're in Windows. This is Windows 11, and we need to get the latest graphics driver installed so our new GPU works properly. Since I installed an NVIDIA GPU, I'm going to head over to NVIDIA's website and find the drivers page. They offer 2 different options. If you want to have automatic driver updates, you can click here and download the NVIDIA app that will auto-detect your GPU, download the right driver, and keep your drivers up to date over time. Or if you don't want the app, you can use the search box to manually find the driver you need. So if I do that, I can just click here and download just the driver installer. If you have an AMD or an Intel GPU, just check the description. I'll provide a link to those driver downloads for you so you don't have to go searching the internet for it. And that's it. With the drivers installed, you're ready to start using your new GPU. If you need help with other PC building stuff, check out my PC building playlist. There's tons of detailed videos in there and I'll link it for you down below. Make sure you get subscribed for more content and we'll see you.
All right, so let's get back to, we've made the changes. So I'm just trying to show you how I progress. And this actually makes a lot more sense. So you see that this is going to mount right here like this. Okay, so we got to put, of course, the paste on the CPU. Now you can see by reversing the radiator, which I don't know, common sense would have told me this is the way it should have gone. Thank God somebody pointed that out to me. This clears up this fan so that we don't have that obstruction in front of it. I don't know. I was just thinking that the GPU would be a problem, you know, with this coming in from this direction, but obviously it's not. And we've peeled that piece of plastic off. And then, of course, we made the final connection This is the DB-Sense connection. Now, one thing I will point out with these modern motherboards and CPUs and water coolers and everything else, if you have cables left in your motherboard case, let's go over here and take a look. I'll just show you everything. Everything has been used. This is, of course, the antenna, which connects for Wi-Fi to the back of it. But you can see there's not a single cable left in here. And of course, this is for mounting to an Intel drive. So if you've got, because my previous build, I was dumber than a bag of stones. I didn't know where stuff went. I just left them all unconnected. So I got to go back and completely rebuild that computer. Plus, I'm going to get rid of the case that I bought. I know $100. I'm out $100, and then I'm going to buy one of these NCT let's see, the NCT9 case, which we've talked about in previous videos. So now let's get back to the motherboard diagram one last time. So I'm going to tell you most every port on this motherboard is hooked up to something. I mean, my God, I never thought. Now, we have 2 PCI slots. Now, for video capture, you can buy an extra card and put in there, which I might do later on. But I don't think I'm going to need it, not with everything that we got. And then, of course, now we understand all of these connections. Of course, we didn't talk about the battery, but there's a battery in the motherboard, of course. And it's been one hell of a project. Here's the CPU opt. That's what I told you that we hooked the water cooler up to. The CPU fan, the second connection is connected to that. And then I was looking for the pump. So here is this. No, that's the. Well, we got the easy temps. We talked about those. Those are hooked up. Here you go. This is number 5. And so this is where we hooked up. This right here. Okay, this is where we hooked up the final connection for the water cooler. The number 5. So the 5 is the fan 5, and you got the 6 pump. Okay, I'm not sure that it really matters. I think they're just both fan connections. And then, of course, we've got the blower on top of the memory. Let's go over and look at that real quick. I'll just show you that one last time. So this here, I didn't know what that was. I'd never say it's called a DB fan or something for cooling down the memory, and that comes down and connects to the fan connection down here. So you can see the pump right there, and this is the fan connection connected right there. So and then of course we've got this here. I by the way, I said this was connected to the fan in the previous video. It's it's hard to stay connected. It's an RGB connector that it's connected to. Okay, and there are various RGB connections on the motherboard, but that's what you want to connect this to. This is going to glow. This will hold the graphics card in place. So let's go ahead and get the graphics card in, mount the radiator to the CPU, and then we'll bring the monitor in. You can see I've already got the. If you look underneath here, I got the 50-foot LAN cable, and we got the motherboard and mouse ready to plug in, and then we'll power the sucker up and, well, cross your fingers and hope to die. Let's see if we've got it done. I think we do. I can't think of anything else. I mean, my God, one hell of a project.
Company that built the tools everyone has depended on, like Windows, Office, and Xbox. They weren't just selling software, they were shaping how the world worked and how we played games and how we connected with one another. But over time, I feel like it's changed. Microsoft has turned into something else entirely, a tech giant obsessed with subscriptions, engagement metrics, and collecting so much user data. Slowly but surely, they have drifted away from their original purpose. And if you've been around long enough, you've probably felt it too. So let's talk about what has really happened. How did one of the greatest tech companies in history lose its focus? In the beginning, Microsoft had one of the boldest missions in tech, a computer on every desk and in every home. It was so simple, it was so good, but in the 1980s, it was revolutionary. What's even cooler is that they actually did it.
We did it! We actually did it!
Windows made computers accessible to millions of people. Office actually made them useful, and then even Xbox made Microsoft part of everyday life at home. Their products didn't just run things, they enabled people to do things that they couldn't do before. Businesses trusted them, developers built on them, and users loved them. Sure, it wasn't always perfect, but there was this feeling that Microsoft was on your side. But once you achieve your mission, what's next? You either find a new purpose or you could start to lose your way. That turning point came when Microsoft realized something, that the real money wasn't in selling more products or more hardware, it was in owning their users. And around the time that Windows 8 and Office 365 launched, everything started to change. Instead of improving the great tools they already had, they started building entire ecosystems. These systems were designed to keep users locked in, kind of like Apple.
It's a trap!
Windows stopped feeling like something you owned and enjoyed using. It became something you felt like you were stuck using because of where you worked or where you went to school. All the modernization, the completely unnecessary updates. It wasn't about making things better. It was about maintaining control of the user. That's when Microsoft stopped asking, what can we build? And then they started asking, how long can we keep people paying for this stuff? Then they found their perfect formula. Recurring revenue. Office turned into Microsoft 365, and then those annoying Windows updates became nonstop experiments to see what they could get away with. Xbox even shifted focus from their consoles to Game Pass. I'm not even a gamer, and I find that annoying. They figured out how to make people pay over and over and over again for essentially the same stuff they had before. Honestly, it's smart business. Every company dreams of predictable revenue, but then once your entire model depends on those subscriptions, the customer stops becoming the focus and then they become the metric. That changes their relationship. You stop building the best product and then you start building one that just keeps people satisfied enough to stay subscribed. And it feels like being in a relationship where the other person keeps promising to change, but then every update somehow makes things worse and then you're regretting giving them another chance anyway. Suddenly, Microsoft wanted to reinvent itself again, and then this time they're betting everything on AI. Copilot this, recall that, Bing Chat. Does anyone even use Bing Chat? I mean, there's nothing wrong with innovating or trying something new, but most of these AI features feel rushed or half-baked.
And Coop has delivered undercooked salmon.
It's like they're trying to look futuristic instead of actually being useful, and then they're all about the aesthetic instead of the intention of fixing problems for their users. AI should make Windows smarter, and then right now instead it's just making things noisier. That's what happens when a company loses confidence. It starts chasing buzzwords and trends to remain relevant instead of building trust or focusing on what they're actually good at. Microsoft isn't leading the AI revolution, but they're sure hiding behind it. It's like they're crossing their fingers that the hype covers up how shitty the user experience has become. And this isn't just about their products, it's about their culture. Microsoft used to be full of builders and creators and innovators, people that were obsessed with solving problems. And now it just feels like a company run by executives that are way more interested in shareholder meetings and chasing numbers. When I think of Microsoft, I don't think of a brilliant software engineer or anyone with technical ability. I think of a bunch of jerks in suits in a boardroom somewhere. Innovation has been replaced by risk management. When a company's goal shifts from what's next to what's profitable, you end up with exactly what we see now. A bloated, self-protecting organization that can't see past its own data dash points and projections. That's the kind of thing that kills great products before they even get a chance to exist. The results are starting to speak for themselves. You can look them up. Windows 11 and the hardware restrictions, Copilot's privacy backlash, the recall features PR disaster. These aren't random mistakes. They're part of a much bigger problem. Microsoft doesn't seem like they're innovating anymore. They're just extracting everything they can from their customers, and they've completely lost their focus. Every forced update, the ads, the upsells, it is exhausting. And people are noticing that they can't tell the same story over and over and over in different ways without getting caught. Businesses notice too, they're tired of surprise features and updates that break what used to work for them. What used to be the trust and excitement about the latest update or the release has been turned into tolerance and then bracing of what could happen to all the work that you just did on your latest project.
Get ready, everybody. He's about to do something stupid.
While Microsoft has been busy nickel and diming its users, the competition's been quietly stepping up. Apple has doubled down on the hardware and the software integration. It is clean, consistent, and premium. And can we talk about Tahoe? I know, Windows did the whole glass look years ago, but oh my gosh, it looks so good. And then Google built the cloud productivity world that Microsoft tried to copy. And if you're ever comparing Google Workspace to Microsoft 365, I don't know, to me, one clearly feels more enjoyable to use. And then Linux, that's not just for developers anymore. It's fast, reliable, and refreshingly free of nonsense. There are a ton of people who've made the switch and they are loving it. Even smaller startups are creating lightweight, privacy-focused tools that make Microsoft look tired.
So tired. So tired.
The empire that once dictated the future is now reacting to it. People don't leave overnight. They leave one frustration at a time. So can Microsoft come back from this? Sure, but not on the path they're currently on. You don't win users back with gimmicks, you win them back with rebuilding trust. And to fix this, Microsoft needs to remember what made them great in the first place, empowering their users, giving them ownership, and how easy everything was to use. People don't want AI in every menu or ads buried in their file explorer. They don't care. They just want software that works. They want tools that are stable and predictable and updates that don't feel like they're gambling. The irony is that Microsoft already knows how to do all of that. They just stopped caring and prioritizing it. Look, Microsoft isn't going to suddenly wake up one morning and become what it used to be, but that doesn't mean we're stuck. Right now, you have a choice. You don't have to live inside one ecosystem anymore. You can build your workflow around tools that actually work for you. For businesses, that means picking software that puts control back in your hands. Platforms that are flexible and custom built around how your team works. And then for the rest of us, it's as simple as being intentional about what we use. Stop clicking accept on every single prompt. Question why something needs access to your data or your location all the time. And then if a product or app adds more frustration than value, find a different one that doesn't. Lord knows there are so many out there. This isn't a rebellion. I think of it as a recalibration. You don't need to ditch Microsoft altogether. There's still a lot I like about Microsoft. Windows runs on just about everything. Office apps are everywhere, and for a lot of businesses, it's still a solid setup. There's a reason it's still so popular. And then to me, the best part about tech right now is that you do have so many options. Just because you're on a PC doesn't mean you have to live entirely in Microsoft 365. You can use Google Workspace for email and docs, and you can manage projects and apps like Notion or Monday. If you've only ever used Windows, maybe it's time to try out Apple's ecosystem. Macs, iPhones, iPads, they all talk to each other, and you can still use all the same Microsoft tools on those devices if you want to. That's the point. You get to decide which ecosystem is the best fit for you. What matters most is that your tech makes your life easier and not more complicated. Microsoft's story isn't over, but this chapter, it could be a warning. Microsoft is just one example of a company that once gave people power, and now it's taking it away. And then if they don't change course, Microsoft is not just going to lose users, they're going to lose relevance in a huge chunk of the market. Innovation doesn't just die when you stop building new things. It dies when you stop listening, and then when you stop wanting to solve problems for your users. Microsoft doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. They just need to remember why people trusted them to build it in the first place. And if they can't, someone else will. I'm not rooting against Microsoft. I just miss the good old days. What about you? Do you think that they can get their spark back, or is that era long gone? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, hit subscribe. We've got a lot more to talk about.
All right, so we have so the graphics card is seated, and I heard it click, but I wanted to show you how flimsy this is. You could damage that very easily, so we're going to screw it in the front, and then we're going to brace in this graphics card, and this is the last step for the PC. And then we'll have to bring in the monitor and begin testing, and we're going to go over the BIOS settings. First thing you're going to do when you power this thing up, the power on is going to take a long time, and then of course you're going to want to go into the BIOS and change the BIOS settings. Well, you're going to flash the BIOS first, and then you're going to go into the BIOS settings, and so we'll get to that in just a minute. Let's keep going. All right, so I wanted you to see this. Now I did a change up. Rather than use those little screws, I had these as extra screws, but look here. Couldn't get this in because of the size of that graphics card, and that's why we took out not just two, we took out all four of those before we put the graphics card in. Now you can see it's in there good and firm now. So now we're going to brace this graphics card with the tool that we have. So let's get that done. All right, this is the reason when you're building a computer why you got to get it built fast. So I got to send this back. This is the Rogue Herculix. It would have been cool. Just wasn't a good fit for the case and was going to block the fan airflow. But, you know, these new graphics cards, look at here, came with that bracket right there. You just screw it in on the bottom, and it's got that card braced in there real well. So this is it. We're done building. Next phase is to power on, flash the BIOS, set the BIOS settings, and pray. All right, so let's get this on the video real quick. There's the main monitor. That is the beastie that I bought, the 27-inch that we talked about in the previous specs. Won't go into that now, but I'm going to have to take that out, and we're going to move it in next to the newly built computer. That'll be the next step. And I've been told to use this monitor for installing the operating system. But the next video, we're going to be talking about the BIOS settings. That was very, very complex. I spent, I don't know, about 5 hours last night with Grok talking about the BIOS, the optimal BIOS settings for the newly built video studio build. And the reason that I was concerned was we're going to do virtualization on this computer because we've got so much disk space. And I was looking for the best virtualization solution, and we're going to talk about that. It's not VirtualBox, and it's not VMware. Okay, it's going to be KVM. So that's the Linux virtualization solution. And so there's a lot of BIOS settings we're going to have to go through once we flash. And of course, I'll make a video about flashing the BIOS and the BIOS settings, and that'll be the next video. Peace out. Stay free. And by the way, the reason why we're going with Linux Mint 22.2 was up front in the video there. I wanted you to see that. I got to give her attribution. She was fantastic, wasn't she? Now you know why we're going with Linux. And by the way, the virtualization software with this powerful a build will run Windows 11 if I ever need to for whatever reason. So it's not like, now of course you could use Wine for some of your Windows utilities, but we're not going to do that. We're gonna put a virtual operating system on here, and then I can run multiple versions of Linux, and we can run Windows 11 if we so desire. Peace out. Stay free. Hope you enjoyed the video.